Hey, welcome everybody. It's Thursday. It's the last Thursday of the month. And as always, the last Thursday of the month, it's book review time. Dale's back. Hello, my friend. How are
Hey,
you?
how's it going?
Good. Welcome everybody to the flip side of leadership. And as always, I am Flip, and that is Dale. And we're going to talk today about a good book out there, another Lencioni book that we've read before, as we've read at least one of them before that we've reviewed on here, and we're gonna need another one. And I know this is one near and dear to Dale's heart. So if you don't have it, it is the whoops, I'll get the light there. It's the truth about employee engagement. Employee engagement again, something that I think the topic is being. How would you say it? It's very it's hot right now, right? It's a very hot topic. We've heard things. Laura and I are about to take on what do they call it? Quiet quitting, which I think has a lot to do about employee engagement about it. And so Dale and I are going to tackle this one today and really talk about it. And I think there was a prelude to this before, which is about the 3 traits of job misery before, and then it turned into this. He turned it into the truth about employee engagement very recently. But let's jump right into it. Give me your initial thoughts. I know this is a near and dear one. I know this is one that you teach very in your high performance in your
I mean,
stuff.
why I'm excited that we got to this one finally, because I know we've been throwing it around on the list for a while, for the last a lot of this year, right?
Yeah.
It is the reason I'm looking forward to talking about it, and why I love these book review segments is because I recommend this all the time, right? In working with business owners, oftentimes, right, the competence they're trying to build is in leadership. And a major factor of leading a team, especially a business team, who can quit, right? Because you and I, come from the military, guy can't quit his job on us,
right,
necessarily.
Absolutely.
Right. But in the civilian sector and running a business, you mentioned the quiet quitting, but people just resigning in general. Why do people quit? And how do you keep people? How do you attract people? How do you, have people go home excited about their day's work with your business, and loving their job and wanting to do well in it. And so I'm glad we're here on this book, because I want to be able to tell people, hey, go listen to me and Flip talk about the truth about employee engagement. And that's what a lot of these content and lectures that I we do is for that, right?
Right.
To kind of accelerate people's growth. Because this one is a conversation I have often. And hats off to Matt Bagley, who turned me on to Lencioni. Matt was started as my COO at Corsica, and I promoted him to be our president there for a bit. And so he turned me on to Patrick Lencioni. And what I love about Patrick's stuff is that he tells a story, right? And man, all the way back,
it's a fictional book, with a message.
when it comes to our ability to retain, right, we learn lessons through stories, and that goes all the way back to the Bible, right? That's a collection of stories. Aesop's fables are collections of stories, and what I like about Lencioni is he tells a story to get his point across, which you remember that better.
Sure.
And
it's relatable.
Yeah, it's relatable. All right, you can picture yourself in these characters, or you can picture the your real life version of these characters, that he goes through. And so I think it's a great topic. It's a very important one. And even in this story, he tells the tale of, 2 different pizzerias and stuff. And one has high engagement. Everyone's loving their job. It's a great experience. And then he buys one that is not that, and how he transitions it and the lessons he learns and and so on. So, I've got a ton. This is another one. I've just got a page of highlights and takeaways to dive into.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Well, let's jump into them. And I guess the best place probably to start is to talk about real quick the 3 areas of job misery that he kind of brings up. And that's irrelevance, being that way, and being immeasurement, and anonymity. Right. And we can break each one down and really talk about it. Let's start with anonymity. I mean, when you talk about it, look, every employee is important. Right. And I saw that no more importantly. And I saw a great version of employee engagement when we were fighting ISIS in 2015 and we were dropping bombs and that was going off. And I can tell you that when my air group commander said, I want to show the videos of us bombing people on the mess decks, he was trying to link, and I know he was because I had talked to him about it. He was trying to link the cooks' work to us killing bad guys, right? And he was doing that through saying, look, if my people don't eat, right, and our pilots don't eat, our people that load the bombs don't eat, whatever the case is, this wouldn't have happened. So you had a direct impact, and he wanted them to know, and anonymity, he was saying, hey, look, your job, you as a person are not forgotten in all of this. You are 100% to be appreciated by your unique qualities that you're bringing to the table. And just because you're doing that doesn't mean it's any less important than the pilot that's flying the plane, right? And so I thought that was he was trying to make people visible on a smallest of scales and make the connection, right? Because large organizations, even small organizations, people can understand, oh, well, the only important people are the ones that are in charge. There's no way that happens, right? There's absolutely no way that happens. And everybody knows it. We found COVID showed us, right, that we need supplies. We need the people who make toilet paper almost more than we need, right?
We're still suffering from that fact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it shows us that. And listen, we have it ass backwards in the world where we don't recognize, we've talked about this before, teachers, EMS, police, right? They don't get the recognition and definitely because we tie everything to salary. We think, oh, it's this and it's titles and it's you're the CEO of whatever, and that makes you in some odd reason more important than. No, it doesn't. Like it really doesn't, in that case. And so I love the anonymity one because it's about recognition and making sure that you link that chain of how a business works and how someone at a company can be lost, and how it's your job as a leader really to look at what they are and then link that to the importance of everything else.
Yeah. A couple highlights here, it basically, people cannot be fulfilled in their work if they are not known.
Right.
And people who see themselves as invisible, generic, or anonymous cannot love their jobs no matter what they're doing, right? If they just don't feel a sense of fulfillment, contribution. And you mentioned a lot of like jobs that, like teachers' jobs and things like that. I think, where we missed the point is we don't recognize the impact, right, of the collective of teachers, right?
Sure.
We just look at them like, oh, it's a school full of teachers. We're not recognizing that as a whole, how much impact they have, right? You're just looking at a teacher and you go, oh, you're just showing up and you're reading books to the kids every day. You're doing a basic job. And if you were going micro on it and like just solely looking at that position, sure, but you're naive, right? You're not seeing the impact of the whole, right? And the impact of that teacher and these other jobs, right? So we look at them in this very fragmented way and therefore don't give enough appreciation to the impact of these roles that you mentioned that, do suffer here in this area, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we use teachers as a great example because it's been tossed around all the time that we don't. And I think we look at appreciation and we look at purpose and we sometimes fragment it into silos, right? Into what you do. And then, but the bigger picture is how they all, how all those fragments fit together to create something, right? And you create this world or this society or this company, right? Because each company is its own unique little world and everybody fits together, right? And if you don't, I fully agree. It reminds me of, and I forgot if it was Moneyball or where it was, where the janitor said, I I help win World Series. Right? He said that's
That
what
was
I
that's
think
the janitor putting the man on the moon.
yes, that's exactly what it was. Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. And he said, I helped put the man on the moon, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. There was
Yeah.
something else with there was another sports reference one, and I can't remember what it was. I thought it was Moneyball, but yeah, like you want to talk about connected, and you make the argument. I'm pretty sure that the people at the top didn't have those type of connections and weren't thinking about it that at the time, but that guy did. That guy was like, you know what, I do this, right? I that is like that's a self-importance piece that went I actually do. And what I did, and we spoke about this before, and there's so for all of our viewers, Dale and I read a lot of the reviews from other people as well, not just our own opinions about when we read the book. Because, and I think I'll tell the reason why I think it's important. I think it's important because you don't always see I see from my perspective of how I see it versus how someone else sees it, which could be, which could be very different about it. And so I think it's important that when we look at this, it's great to see it from someone else's perspective. When we teach leadership, we teach the things that we hope leaders have and we believe should have. But it's important for us to see that you know we're talking about every employee. You're talking about from the CEO down to the newest hire, or from someone who has what would we consider the most responsibilities down to someone who may have the least responsibilities. And at each one of those responsibilities, somehow, some way, has to have purpose behind it. Right. And I think that's what anonymity really brings out is the purpose factor.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. That leads to the second one, right? Which and they're very tightly connected, and that's irrelevance, right? And so this really to me was about that again, tied it to the to kind of the same thing about being recognized, but also knowing that their job matters, right? And a great analogy I have is if you took and for those of you who don't know, there's and I know we use a lot of military references, but it's a great one. There's a whole group of people stationed overseas 24/7 in the Indo-Pacific region, in Japan, in Guam, in all those places, right? And they're there for one reason and one reason only, and that is for China. That's what they're there for, right? They're there to protect and to look and to whatever for those things. And I can tell you, because I've been there, we had to really get and really struggle with our purpose of being there, because there was a lot of, are we ever going to really believe we go to war with China? God, I hope that never happens, right? It would just be horrible. But the general thinking was we're probably not going to really do it. There could be a lot of gray area shadow wars that are taking place, and they have. But when you don't have that purpose driven behind what you're doing, and you were just like, well, we're here for a show of force, or we're here to cross a date line, so that way, or cross a latitude so we can provoke and show that we're going to. Whereas you had the people in the Gulf, they're putting warheads on foreheads, right? Like that was real as to what was happening. There were ground members who were fighting every single day. And I think it was hard to figure out what job matters. And listen, I'm going to say this: you could go from a vice president down to the last person to feel like that your job doesn't matter, right? You could have somebody in a very high position of power, and knowing that they don't have the last say in something, and they could feel like, well, then I don't necessarily matter. So I don't. What kicked me with this one is when you couldn't see the connection with work and satisfaction about the entire thing. And I think it was driven, you have to be able to show people not only that their job is important, but also that how it links together. Right. I just see that it does that.
And I think that's it. And for you employers out there, right? Two things. One, I think if you're not sure, like if someone's job matters, like wait till they take the week off, right? Or give them a week off, right?
Right.
And see what happens. And you'll come to, and you see this in like small businesses, homegrown businesses or whatever, that just kind of like grow. Sometimes I call these like the rat's nest of businesses. They just have kind of grown to what they are. And maybe along the way, there's not been an attention to organizational structure and job roles and titles and kind of really like polished. It's not like a polished operation. So you can kind of start to get confused. Well, I don't even know why Bob's here. What does Bob do every day? Right. It's easy. Give Bob the next 3 days off, and you're going to find out, how Bob's job matters. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, I think we saw a bit of this through the COVID thing, through COVID. I think there was a fair amount of layoffs that happened that employers on the other side realized that they had possibly overstaffed or maybe didn't have, because if you imagine, likewise, like you take that same effect to like a corporate environment where there's 1,000 employees, right? There's probably a fair share of fluff just due to budgets and, if you don't use it, you'll lose it type of thing, and maintaining of positions. So there was not a necessity sometimes, just because of the abundance of the business or whatever, to do that type of polishing, even though it's very necessary. But then along comes the necessity to do that, right? COVID's here. Our numbers are getting whacked. We got to actually put our heads down and figure out what we need to function. But I feel that businesses found through that process that they had roles and positions that really truly didn't matter. I know a little off from like this, but I think some of the result of some jobs not coming back was a little bit of this, right? Like finding out like some positions weren't necessary to the organization. But you also found this out about like work from home. Like some organizations found like it wasn't necessary to be in the office to produce their product or service or whatever the case may be. But you're going to ask?
Well, I don't disagree that probably happened, but I think necessity of the business said, where can we cut to still function as how we're going to function, right? Whatever that's going to be, right? So I talk about, adaptability, sustainability, and weatherability in everyday leadership. And all three of those were on display during COVID, where you had to be able to do what you were going to do. And I think what's interesting about your statement is it would be interesting to know how many people sucked up those duties of those other people within their own jobs, right? And said, oh, okay, well, we can afford to let this person go because, right, it's just maybe they just do a single function that someone else could have picked up. And I don't disagree with you. I think that's absolutely that we did see that. But I think there's a COVID changed it changed a ton of
it forced change.
It forced change, right. Right. And there was, what's interesting to me is like colleges, right? And how the educational system changed for that. There were plenty of schools, colleges mostly, but there was also plenty of primary and secondary school systems that were using technology within not only their schools, but even take home, right? Where they were using like Canvas or they were using whatever to assign grades or whatever it was. And I think the ones that were prepared to said, we don't need kids to come back. It really wasn't just assign the homework now on their iPads and their computers and just let them log into the system. They were somewhat prepared where at least in that sense, where it's like, well, why don't we don't have to cut people. They just changed their platform. Instead of seeing them in person, they're just now educating them through this type of stuff. And so, but I think when I agree with you, but I think regardless whether you got to tell them why their job doesn't matter then, if that's the case, right? If you find out, because we talk
or
about
maybe maybe COVID made the job irrelevant, right?
Absolutely.
Like maybe it was relevant to that point, but COVID made the job irrelevant.
Correct. And that's what I think, where you say, well, your job does matter, but we have a more efficient way to do it now because we can save money instead of, because when you think about a labor force, right? You think about, it was really interesting. We were doing a study a long time ago with UPS, and one of their biggest costs that they have is employee back claims in retirement where they have to pay medical pensions and stuff because people were lifting boxes all day. And that's, you get a 30-year driver who's lifted 1 billion boxes, and do they do it right every time with their legs? Absolutely not. It doesn't work like that. But they were seeing that, right? And truck lines were seeing the same thing. And you start to say to yourself, you can understand how a person can cost so much. And it's not just the salary that they're paying now, it's the retirement, and as well as I do, the DoD went to a completely different retirement system where they were giving stuff that now they give stuff at 5 years. If you've paid into it, you get actually something back out of it from a retirement in a 401k portion kind of type of thing, where it never had that before. It was you did 20 and you got your retirement, or you didn't. And you got nothing, right? And there's a lot of people that got out at 16 years with nothing. And so the people part of it and the job portion and the relevance of them, it's important. And I think from a standpoint of leadership, right, you look at it and you say, okay, how do you make sure that you appreciate someone's job and know that you can't do it without them, right? And one of the things I like to do, and I don't know, this really hit me with this whole thing, is I think about irrelevance and I think about servant leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And I think about that. A lot of people look at leaders or CEOs, whatever you want to call it, in middle managers, whatever, those people that are in charge, and they look at them as that they're they're a piece of the cog as well as anyone else, right? And so when you look at it in that perspective and say your job is to lead, but leadership's no different than a technical writer whose job is to write. Yeah. So it's not a skill set that potentially is different. It's just not a skill set necessarily. It is different,
tangible, right?
Correct. It's a tangible thing that you look at. And then when you look at it and say, well, they all matter the same. I need someone to lead. I need someone to write. I need someone's skill set that has a knowledge from their college and their degree. I need all those things to look at it. Then irrelevance becomes an afterthought in my eyes, because then you don't have tiers necessarily. Now you think about the team as a whole. You think about every single piece has to be there. And if you're the leader that doesn't go back and show appreciation to people and don't call them out when they're supposed to, then you're going to fall into job misery is going to happen. It falls into that for me. And that's the way I like to combat it, if that makes sense. And I know we'll talk about that more as we move over.
And just to summarize that, why irrelevance matter, it's because everyone needs to know that their job matters to someone, right? That their job matters to somebody, that they're making a difference to someone. Because there's this general sense of fulfillment that we have. I'm doing a bit of study of Adlerian psychology right now, and it talks about this in a way that we just want to feel like we're contributing in some way, right? As psychologically, we want to feel like we're contributing to the community, right? And think bigger picture, like community, not like your town, not your office, but like the community of humanity, like that we're contributing in some way.
Yeah.
And this is
purpose.
Yeah. And that's this part right here. Like if you're not feeling the relevance of that, it's a source of job misery.
Absolutely. And then it moves into the last one of the triangle of misery. And that's immeasurement, right? And that's, simply put, in the way I look at it, is you bring someone on and you hire them to do a job, and they're doing that job. I think inherently people want to please you. I do. I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job. I want to know I'm doing a good job, or I want to know I'm not doing a good job, because I want to know how I'm being measured, right? And I think this brings in a lot of stuff as well, where I talk about it in my core applications of, here's the foundation of what you want me to do, whether that's through technical publications and what I'm supposed to do in my workflows and processes, whether that's through my HR and how I should act and what the policies are, and whether the company norms are about what we accept and what we'll be good with. But how well am I doing it? I need to know that from an employee standpoint, and I need to know that from my leader every once in a while, of saying, whatever is it, and I'll argue this point if you want, but I think you will agree with me. it's not just at the end of the year for your employee evaluation, right? It's got to be continuously through that. It's got to be through, and I think to me it's gauging progress and how they and their level of contribution. And you need, this is both, to me, I read this as positive and negative because I believe it's supposed to be positive and negative. You need to tell someone if they're not doing the level of
Yeah.
expectation you're doing, right? Because if they don't know that, or if you fluff them up and blow smoke, which is worse in my eyes, then guess what? Then like, how do you hold them accountable, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no accountability in that sense if you don't not only have a measuring stick but are able to also relate the measurement to them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely important with it.
And I think the other important part about like this measurability piece is it does need to be tangible, as you mentioned, but it also needs to be fully within the employee's control to attain. So the way I word this to folks when I talk about it is like your team member needs to know what a good job looks like, and they need to be in complete control of making that happen.
Correct.
Right. So if your job is, if you make 8 widgets today, that's a good day's work. But if you're not in control of like getting the materials for the widgets, or you have to wait for someone else, or it's not 8 widgets, you need to make 8 widgets that the boss likes, right? Like those things are not fully within control because you can't control what the boss likes, right? That's too ambiguous. But if you know, hey, my job is to create 8 widgets a day, and I have all the tools and resources I need to get that done, I know what a good day looks like, right? And I have full control of achieving that. And that's the important part of this here, that there's so much ambiguity sometimes in operations where you hire someone and you just don't give them the clear guidance on what a good day looks like, and they get lost real quick. And this is where I kind of mention to people, like, it's hard to meet expectations that are not set, right? You know, if you don't
building your foundations foundationally, what's the expectations going to be?
Yeah.
I guess I differ with you a little bit in the sense of that there's so many things that are dependent on one another. And that's where I look at, and this is the part about the book that it focused singly what you just said about depends on the opinions and the whims of another person, right? When it depends on someone else, you can't always help that. In fact, if you're building teams, you are depending on other people to do stuff, right? And so I'm a huge person on no single points of failure, or try to eliminate single points of failure if you can within things, right? And you're not always going to be able to do that, whether that's because of technology, whether it's because of workflows, whether it's because of educational basis, whatever. You're not always going to be able to do that. And I think you need to be able to say to someone, and employees also need to be able to say, this was the one I had the hardest time saying, because there's a lot of times I'm like, it's all on the leader. And I that is 95% where I believe it comes from. But I believe there's part of employee engagement where the employee has to realize, okay, hold on. My 8 widgets, I could only make 7 today because XYZ didn't get what because of this happened, right? But I did what I'm supposed to do.
But what does a good day look like? The 8 widgets?
Yeah, let's just say 8 widgets was the day, right? You just made that up. And let's just say we only got through 7. But we got through 8 because everybody did. But all of a sudden, down at the far end of the factory, something happened where I couldn't get mine done. Well, guess what? In my eyes, that's still a good day for me, but it may not be a good day for the team because we didn't, right? And so Laura, our good friend, talks about me to we, and how we talk about teamwork and we talk about those types of stuff. And there's a singleness of just the single employee. And then there's a team engagement where we did not hit our mark as it was. I may have got my stuff done, right? I may have I'm the finishing person on the line of widgets, and I got them all done like I was supposed to, but I didn't get that 7th one. I didn't get that chance to.
So I would argue then that person's good day is getting not necessarily 8 widgets, because they don't have full control over the 8 widgets.
Right.
That person's good day is I get every widget that comes to me done within a X amount of time or whatever, right? Because then that says what's in their control is when a widget delivers, they get it done, right? So even if they only got 2, they did their job, because a good day for them is like every widget that comes across my desk, I get done in a half hour, right? Or an hour. I get done in an hour. So
Right.
even if something happened down the line, because I don't want to confuse like operations and employee engagement. And the point of this is, if you tell someone that their good job is 8 widgets a day, right? But they actually don't have control because of down the line, production, but they are on a mission to get 8 widgets done a day. This is where the engagement piece comes in, because they don't feel like they are in control of what they were told a good job looks like, right? Because if you hire someone and say, hey, this position makes 8 widgets a day, and basically, what are we saying? So if you make your 8 widgets, you did a good job. If you don't make 8 widgets, hey, you're at risk, right? Because that's the number we picked. But if that person doesn't have control of 8 widgets coming across them to get it, now they feel like they're unable, they're not in control of their own fate. And that's the big point of this immeasurement point, as with regards to their ability to control it, because there's a big difference of every widget that comes to you, you get it done within an hour. They are in 100% control there. On assembly line, your job is to get 8 widgets done a day. Well, if someone else is delivering a shorter, like now they're not in control of their own fate. Now they're at risk. And that's the point I felt like Lencioni was trying to make, is that there, as far as engagement's concerned, operations and all that aside.
I don't disagree. That's where it's a fictional book, right? And that's where it's a fictional story where, and I know he's bringing this from real life type of things, but I don't want to say that there's not single points of failure jobs, right? Your job may be just to do one thing, and that's what you're supposed to do. I think, and maybe that I looked at it and I did it specifically somewhat of talking about it in anonymity, irrelevance, and immeasurement, is because I felt like I didn't disagree with the immeasurement portion of it. And I understand about the fate, things that aren't in fate. Look, that's a feeling you're going to have inside of you. And most all of these are feelings that people have inside of them about their own engagement personally, right? And we're looking at it from perspectives of, as leaders, we need to remember, right? I can fix people. I can help people being fixed about making their work matter, right? I can help them feel like it's there to a point. Again, it's all self, right? Some self may be like, I'm in the wrong job, but I'm here. I can't necessarily change that because we're doing what we're supposed to do. If you join the wrong job and put in something just to get a paycheck, and that, how many people go out and get, oh, it's $100,000. I want that job. And all of a sudden they hate it, right? I have someone recently who moved into my neighborhood who thought they were going to get the dream job at Garmin. And in 4 months, their house is back on the market, and they're moving back to where they were because it's not the dream job. Like I can control, as a leader, I can control some of that, right? And this book is about for leaders to say, hey, these are the reasons why, right? When I look at a measurement, I look at something that potentially, if I'm relying on a team to do specific stuff, I can't necessarily change that it's going to be a team effort, so that you're a measurement and the fate that you have, that may be just part of what happens within it all. I looked at that as more of a both employee and leader shared experience of saying, what can we do, right? Because I'm thinking about, how do we fix the problem? How do we get to yes? How do we stay positive with it all? I didn't, and what you thought, I don't disagree. Lencioni was trying to say this and what he was meaning by what he was. I looked at, and I guess this is how I always look at stuff, but I looked at it as, sometimes you're not able to control that. There are uncontrollables that you have, and leaning on. And if we're talking about building teams and working as teams, I looked at it as like, that's naturally going to happen at some points in time. And you can't, in my eyes, again, this is me, I can understand how I can empathize with people who said, I didn't fulfill what I needed to but it necessarily because I can't control that.
Mm.
Right. Like I looked at it as like, well, I did what I needed to do. All right. But the team, so there, it split the feelings about the misery pain for me and said, this was the one that was out of my control. Right. Like people can affect that in other ways. I don't disagree with you with it. I did get the same piece, um, that people's success in a measurement was dependent on other people. But I thought that was a natural part of business. Like the other two were like, you can help and make sure that you make sure that every job matters, right? You can do something about that as a leader. You can do something that making sure that people stay engaged and stay fulfilled if you want to in your work, as long as they love what they do and there's no spoofs, right? We're just talking about if in a perfect world. I just thought the last one, the measurement piece, was something that is not always within your control as a leader. I thought that was somewhat out of your control to have active participation in. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. So I feel like we're giving this hall pass on this one, and I would challenge a leader to stay firm with it, because I'll stick with my simple example still. If you've
Stay
told
firm with what?
To giving an individual their control of their measurement in a way, because let's go back to my guy on the line, right?
Okay.
If you tell them like your good job is 8 widgets a day, and we say, hey, there's a day something broke downstream, they could only get done 6, right? They've lost the control. Now your point saying like, hey, well, not everyone's going to have control every time. Well, you're looking at it from a leader perspective, but what the book is trying to say, like, why does that guy quit, right? Like, what keeps people engaged in their job? And what I'm trying to point out is that the measurables matter, and this point of control matters, right? Because if you hired John, you said, John, I'm hiring you to make 8 widgets a day, man. 8 widgets a day. That's your job. Right on, boss. And he's making 8 widgets a day. But now we have a day where he can only get 6, because down the line, in order for him to make 8 widgets, he needs the sprockets, right? Whatever. Well, a Friday comes and something happened down the line and he can't make that. Or the person before him in the line, they suck at their job and they can only do 4, and they just got hired, and now he's only making 4 widgets a day. But he's been told that, John, a good job is 8 widgets a day. Well, now, again, thinking employee engagement, how does John feel when he's measured against 8 widgets a day and he doesn't have complete control over that, right? How does he start to feel as far as an employee and his desire for that job when he can't make his 8 widgets a day, which is his measurable, right? And what I'm trying to say is he's been given the wrong measurable because he doesn't have the control. He's been told your measurable is 8 widgets a day, and now he can't do that, and it's out of his control. That's the loss of employee engagement. He is at an at-risk employee part because he's been striving for something that he didn't have complete control over. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes complete sense.
Yeah. So I didn't want to confuse, again, operations.
I don't buy it though as like I do the other two. I don't buy it as like I do the other two.
Say, don't buy what compared?
You're
talking about this?
I don't buy this one as if I looked at the other ones as 100% reasons and I filled them up to their cups about 100%, I would 100% agree with it. This one, to me, I believe it's important. I believe it's exactly what you're saying. But I believe life has so much. This is the one that has variability in it. This is the one that an employee who is supposed to measure themselves by 8 uses common sense at some times. I believe it's wearability, right? So I believe that over time that can say, well, I keep getting supposed to be judged on 8,
but
I'm
what
not.
I'm trying to get to. That's where, like, if there is, I get you like an exception, right? The team is functioning, the team can get 8 done. But if the dependency point, it becomes a norm that they're failing, right? I think anyone.
That's over time.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like that's over time that again, that's a, like you can easily listen. I guess when I look at the other two, I look at things that as an employee, they're not based so much on, like this one is literally about things that are out of your control, right? Like it's out of your control if I can't be measured because of things out of my control. There's a sensibility. This is, I'm not saying it's not true, and I'm not saying I don't, I understand it. I just, and I believe that it's part of it. I just believe that there's people can add common sense to stuff first to say, right? And I think because all of this, who is this written for? Who's this? Who did he write this for?
Leaders, managers, yeah,
right. And it's for them to recognize what they need to do in that factor of it, right? So as a leader, the first two are things I can do immediately from day one and say, hey, the other ones may not be the measurement. A measurement is over time, right? I can make someone's job important on day one. I could make them known at day one that they're that they're fulfilled somewhat in it and that they matter. The part about like the part about that last piece of the measurability, that's a time factor that a leader has control over, and there's sensibility that puts into it. It's just common sense. If it was common, right, I get it, it wouldn't be so right. But there's just a sense to me, and again, you know how we talk about this, we think of it from a leadership perspective, but I think about an employee and say, okay, I don't know. It's an interesting point.
I think it's, I see, because I felt like you were saying it wasn't as important as the others, or there needs to be some more flexibility. And I would strive to make the case it's probably one of the most important ones because of this factor of fulfillment and control. Because I can't stress enough how important it is for someone to feel like they're in charge of their own destiny. And
it's the most dynamic of them all to me. I'll give you what I think, and if you want to say it's most important, I would say it's the most dynamic and maybe the hardest. So I'll even go this far to say the other two I would say are easy to rectify, right? But this is a very deep one that you have to have a lot of insight to more variables than you do just about someone's happiness and about them feeling a sense of purpose. And maybe it's because the measurement's the hardest one, right? Like people don't like to be necessarily, well, how am I doing? And they don't want to hear the bad or the good of it all. At the same time, with the fate, they don't also want to know, even though it's inevitable, they don't want to hear that their success is based upon other people's success before or whatever it happens. But that's the reality, right? That's the reality of it all, is that we are based upon, if you're working at a job where sales drives all the overhead, which is a lot of the time what happens, we're all hoping sales does really well, right?
Right. But if sales doesn't, and you're downstream from that, and you're told a good job for you is the result of how sales performs, I'm just trying to make the case that those people downstream will not have a high level of satisfaction and engagement in that job because they don't feel in control of that, and they're then at risk, right? But like I said, if you change the number to every time you get a sales lead, your role is X, and I expect it to be done in this amount of time. Now you've taken the sales part out of it. Like, hey, every time you get a lead, your job is to.
It's not really taken out of it.
It is.
Listen,
because
if you work an overhead job at a sales group, right? Let's say you're selling whatever you're selling, doesn't matter, but you're in an overhead position. You are inexplicably tied to sales from a business perspective, and there's
Right.
nothing.
That's why I say I don't want to confuse operations with engagement, though. What I'm trying to say is the person who sees sales not producing and knows that the value of their contribution, right, is measured by how they process what sales produces, and sales isn't doing anything. Those people downstream are going to have a low level of fulfillment and measurability, and it'll cause them to exit, right? Like,
so that wouldn't that be a risk then to anybody at that level?
yes.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
risk is inherently there no matter what.
Right.
Okay. The other two, though,
I'm not arguing the other two. The other two, 100% legit. Simple,
correct.
right? The leader has control of it. But what I'm cautioning is, if you want people to be satisfied in their job, this one is really important, that they feel like they're in control of what they've been assigned as production.
I'd argue you'd have to mitigate it the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because again,
So
like what you're trying to say is like,
that's your important statement of saying.
yeah, I'm just trying to point out, right? Like if people,
Yep.
if people is dependent on sales and sales aren't producing, those people are going to start looking for another job.
100%.
Because they've been right. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like,
Sure.
regardless, right? We can say, well, it's not my fault. Sales isn't producing. Well, there comes a point where that person goes, well, if sales isn't producing, that means I'm not producing. So that means maybe I should start looking for another job, right? Like these are the things that happen when.
But that person is unable to control their fate.
Correct. And that's the point. That's the word, right? Like
right. But that's the one too that I think we're saying the same thing. We're coming at it. It's the beach ball. You see.
No, but what he says in the book, right? Without tangible means for assessing success or failure, motivation eventually deteriorates as people see themselves as unable to control their own fate. So that person downstream who's been told you only do a good job as a result of these people doing a good job, don't feel in control of their own fate and have a low satisfaction rate, is the point he's trying to make.
Yeah. I
agree with it. It's very important.
I know you do. I know this is one of your favorite, and I don't disagree with it. I think now,
and to your point about it being hard, it's very hard.
Dynamic of them all.
It's very hard. You pointed. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And very important, because again, you're going to hire people, because this is what I see on the street, right? I see people hire. I need to hire so-and-so. Right. Why? What are you solving for by hiring this position? Right. Or I need to replace John. He's doing a terrible job. Show me what that means. Right. Because how are we going to know you're going to hire Bob in John's place and he's going to do any better? Right. And that's where this part comes in, because it's easy to kind of like overlay it with ambiguity. And now it just becomes up to how the leader feels that day on what a good job looks like. Right. Because there's not tangible, assessments that are able to be done. And I also loved how, like, Lencioni points out in the book, he says people who aren't good at their jobs don't want to be measured, because then they have to be accountable for something. Great employees love that kind of accountability. They crave it. Poor ones run away from it.
Yeah. I mean, all this is about, having foundations as a leader that you can hold people accountable to. Right.
Yeah.
And I believe in that 100% in everyday leadership. I talk about that a lot, about being the same thing. And again, you're talking about good. We were in our 8-widget world of all things being equal. I don't think when you said it's the most important, I believe in my eyes, I'm saying is I think it's the most dynamic, that you have to, that there are a lot of variables as a leader that you have to take into account with that. And you have to be able to, the more you talked about it, the more I think to myself, that's the more that you have to me, and anonymity and irrelevance are very black and white issues that you can take on. I don't want to say easily, but you can take them on and you can very much do something about them. Mm-hmm. I think when we're talking about a measurement, and I'm glad we got on one of them for so long, but I think it's when you look at the complexity of it and how much potentially you have to compartmentalize it to say, hey, look, talking to your 8-widget person and say, hey, look, you're doing a great job. I know we only got 6 done today. I know you're being measured on getting 8 done, but I know it's also wasn't your fault. And I know we're trying to make up those things down the road. So don't worry about that piece of the puzzle, right? Because what I think you end up finding in that course is you fulfill the need of the contribution, and you serve the purpose of saying, how well am I doing, and letting them know that maybe the foundations that you built upon, right, are changing, and you're okay with that changing at the moment as the leader, and saying, look, we get it. Because that's really how the other one's easy, right? How do you help people fulfill that they feel like they're fulfilled in work? How do you give them a sense of purpose? There are definite ways to do that, and there's cookie cutter ways to do that, but there's more solid ways to do that. This, though, is, you don't see these ones as much, right? It's very dynamic about measurement. It's not just about once a year. It's about saying, hey, how can I give you something else then that you can control, because this piece isn't controllable at this time because of where we're at, right?
Bingo.
Yeah. And I again, I think to me, it's not the most important. It's the most dynamic that you really have to work at as a leader to get in the grit.
Definitely the hardest one to work on.
That I would agree with.
But in again, and why I'm harping on this is just where I see business owners fail the most. Sure. This is why I see turnover.
One, right?
What's that? Yeah,
the hardest one.
Because
it's easy. Like, oh, I appreciate you. Here's a bonus. Like, okay, like, or here's an attaboy.
Well, why did he or she get that bonus and the other one didn't? Right? Like, there's just so much to this one. Mm-hmm. It's just very, very important. And like I say, I think Lencioni points out the fact of tangible control. Yep. Like, because to your point about the widgets, like, why would a leader then feel the need to go talk to Johnny about his 6 widgets to tell him it was okay, right?
Because he knew.
Because he knew Johnny's not happy with his day. Yeah, Johnny's not happy.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, listen, you don't address those things necessarily. I mean, sometimes you address stuff like that happens immediately because it's it's going to make an impact, or you think it might impact. And if you know your people, you know who the ones that will understand, and get that that's not going to be held against them in a sense, right, of the measurement. And then you also understand the people that might be like, whoa, hold on, right? And to me, there's an erosion to all of this, right? There's an overall erosion where, so I always got to throw my stuff in, but I think it's the small things, the everyday deeds of ordinary folks that keep the darkness at bay, right? So Gandalf told us a long time ago in Lord of the Rings, he said, I think it's not all of these things about employee engagement, to me, is an everyday thing, right? It's something that you cannot just be like, well, I've kept you in the dark all year, and now I'm going to give you a $500 bonus. And then somebody goes,
in the dark all year, and now I'm going to fire you.
Right? Yeah, or worse, right? Because they both have actually negative effects. I have to be honest with you. If you don't know why you got that bonus, part of you is like, well, what did I do? What did I do it for? And I fell into it. Listen, a great piece of this whole thing is about what do you call it? Veterans, right? Veterans leave and they try to go find their sense of purpose. And it is really tough to engage at some points in time because your levels and your expectations are not where, you think that they should get it. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's tough. That's really tough sometimes for veterans to find their fulfillment and their sense of purpose. And it takes time because, and this could happen for anything. We've seen it in our business where we're trying to pull people away to come to a new startup, and they were 24 years in a business, and it can happen to anybody. And you just go, well, what's the right? And Jay mentioned to us, he talked about buy-in from the employees. Yeah, you absolutely, if you feel like you're contributing, and some people are more than others, right? Some people are here, some people are there, and so it's a really good. It was a great read, and that's why we talk about it, because we see it in different a little bit different lights, even though we're it's the beach ball theory, everybody, right? Dale and I love the beach ball theory, right? We're looking at the same ball. I see the orange part, he sees the blue part, while someone else, maybe like Jay, will see the yellow part or see the white part or something like that. So, but yeah, no, it's good.
there's a part in the book where they get into the benefits and obstacles of managing for employee engagement. And there's some things here like on kind of like why this is important, right? And so one of the highlights that I think is really important here is he pointed out that by the time people decide to leave an organization, they really have little incentive to tell their soon-to-be former employer that they're leaving because their supervisor really didn't manage them. And without a good manager, their jobs eventually became miserable. So what this is saying is like, we have these exit interviews, right? Like we didn't care to ask, you know, what they thought of their job or this type of interest until you find out they're leaving. You're like, hey, Bob, you're leaving. Why? What's going on? Like that ship sailed, man. Like you're not that. Whereas the right thing to do is have a pulse on this type of thing to say why they would want to stay. Like, what do you love about your job? What could be better? Like, and having these conversations earlier and often to get that feedback. This is then, this, right? This is the essence of communication, right? It's at its core, especially in this world where people can come and go as they please, right? I'm looking forward to you guys talk on the quiet quitting and all that stuff. But, this one's big, right? You don't want to wait until, an employee's leaving to find out that they don't like their job or they're dissatisfied with it, or there's other opportunities, or they have other passions, right? It's a really another big important part of a leader.
I mean, this is something I talk about in my abilities about availability, right? And being on the ground level and knowing your employees, right? We used to call it intrusive leadership in the military, which is totally right, totally a military term, but it's somewhat the truth, right? If you don't have the pulse of what's going on and why, and sometimes, listen, this as well as I do. You're the head of a 200-person company. Can you talk to every single person every single day? No, right? But you have, and you loved it. I love that you still use this, and I think it's important. You have CEO intent, though, that your managers and your leaders who are on the ground level know what your expectations are of them about engagement, right? And I think this is a great, it may be a topic I start to add to everyday leadership is about, everyday engagement, right? Engaging your folks every day about whatever that's going to be and having intentional engagement and active engagement, right? I talk about doing things like actively combating spam, that it doesn't affect you. This is active. You make a great point, I think, with saying, look, if you don't, we're all going to get distracted. We're all going to have things that happen, and that's fine. But if you don't keep that pulse, and I think again, I think being transparent and giving more information to folks too lends you to be amendable to both sides, because you and I talked about the open door policy, right? And we talked about that Marine that we saw that was like, open door policies don't really exist. What he was really trying to say was you've got to be actively engaged with your people and knowing these things, because again, me giving you a $500 bonus at the end of the year versus me telling you all year, man, you did a great job this week. This is really good, right? Taking a little bit of time, hitting another high point for them, maybe recognizing them at a meeting and then giving them that $500 bonus. Man, I'm telling you, I would believe that engagement that you've done all year combats, if you think about it, it combats the immeasurement, it combats the irrelevance, it combats the anonymity that you end up with now an employee who goes, man, I love it. Because I mean, our goal is to what? Our goal is to let you, hopefully that you have the trust, loyalty, and respect of your people, that they want to come to work and they want to do things to you. They want to, when you ask to stay for weekend for longer stuff, they're like, you know what, I got this one over the weekend. I'll put my plans aside. We can move it. Like, you getting to that point, it really is because of engagement, right? And so, I think it's a great, I spot on that you need to be active in it, and it's not something you can just turn on and off. It needs to be turned on. That's one of those buttons that's, they talk about leave the light on overnight. Like that's an overnight light on that you got to keep on all the time. I would agree with that. Well, good. I love this one. This is a good one. I like this one. It's definitely good. I'm glad we talked out about a measurement because
we're still gonna talk it out.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like, and this is it. One of the points of this book that I found and agreed with a lot of the other reviews that I had read with was I found myself thinking, right? I found myself actively thinking about how I do this, how I did this, and why it was important, even though it seemed a bit like, sometimes you pass it over before, and that's right. I believe in the everyday leadership thing that it's the small stuff. Engagement with your employees is small, right? It's not just, there's a reason why you go to the same coffee. You don't have a coffee pot in your office. You use the communal coffee pot because you're going to find out information. You're going to be able to say little things, right? There's a reason why you have gathering spots for people to do that, and it's got negative and positive effects. But I think if you make them a positive thing, then it works out, because it can be that way.
Yeah, 100%, man. So I like I say, this is a really eye-opening book, right? Let's go there.
I would say so. Yes,
it's an eye-opening book, and like I say, if you plug these things in, the anonymity, solve for the irrelevance, and solve for the immeasurement, and you can take the emotion out of some transition, right?
Sure.
The turnover, rather, is the word I was looking for. You can take the emotion out of some turnover when you start to bring some clarity to these things and systemize it, right? Like, this doesn't need to be ad hoc, right? Like reviews, town halls, right? Like your floor walk arounds, things like that. Like your engagement with intention, right? In your another one of your words that I haven't heard you say yet today, but I'm gonna honor it: consistency, right? Like, if you can systemize these things and be consistent with it, it'll go a long way in your organization and help with the turnover, if that's a problem that you have.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you want happy employees, right? That's what you want. You want people to stay for 30 years, retire, and help grow your business to as much as you want. And I think when you are actively engaging your employees at all levels, I think that's kind of the point of this, is what you're trying to end up doing, and like you said, combating those types of things. Yeah. Well, this was a good one. This was a really good one. I like this one. And actually, I didn't think I was going to as much, but it's always, I always find when we do our book reviews, we end up finding at least one little piece that we can chum back and forth with, which is why we do this to everybody. So, hey, now's the moment in time, though. What do you got going on? Let's give a little bit of that for this one to the viewers.
What do I got going on? In Lion's Guide,
lots of stuff.
There's you guys. Yeah, I won't give it all away today. But we've got some great stuff coming out of Lion's Guide. We're growing the team, we're growing the content, we're growing the courses, we're growing, the value. Really aim to help you guys out there, really get better faster, and not feel alone in doing so. I know running a business, being a leader, is a lonely place. So we want to give you a place where you can find, comfort in being amongst peers who are also looking to grow. And we want to help you find the right tools to help you grow with some really experienced individuals, some great resources. So I'm really excited about where we're at. Pay attention, be on the lookout. There's some really good stuff coming to you guys in that area. So
yeah, we'll have a new website up soon. We've got some launch of Everyday Leadership's going to launch very soon on a full scale thing. We've got some high performance stuff coming on board, which is going to really too. We have some big announcements coming within the next, I think, couple of weeks, which is pretty cool.
Everyday Leadership's out now, right? So people who are currently enrolled in workshops who have access to the Lion's Guide Academy, you go check it out. Everyday Leadership's out there now, so you can start looking at those.
And then on the Flipcast for us next week, we've got a taped one, but Laura and I discussed some really good things about having difficult conversations, and which was really cool. We talked about that on the rant that you're going to see next week. That'll be a taped one for you. We've got, what else do we got? We got the Lion's Den. That should be some good ones to come up on the 13th. We got a special guest on the 20th, and he may have actually signed in today, which would be really cool. So it might be him, which would be nice to talk to. And then at the end of the month, next month, we're going to take on very famous And I'm gonna go back and read again because I read a long time ago and I want to read it again. We're gonna go back with to Simon Sinek, and very famous, and start with why is what we're gonna come up with, and really just dive back into it again. I want to look at it from a new perspective now because I haven't read that in probably a really long time, and so I want to go back, read my notes that I've kept on it from before, and really see if I feel any different about the why. I mean, because I read it pre-COVID, and I think that it may have gotten, I think, on both ways. So we're going to review, Dale and I will review that one at the end of the month on the 27th, but that'll be our October for us. But until, let's see, Dale and I will be back on live on the 13th. So we appreciate you guys coming on board with us, whether you're watching it live or whether you're going to watch it later on. And again, The Truth About Employee Engagement, Patrick Lencioni, great book, very good topic that, again, the details behind stuff, right? The details of why things work, the small things. Great book to go out and to kind of maybe some of those issues that you're having are definitely represented here that you can take a shot at and fix some things up with. So thank you, my friend, for coming on board. We appreciate everybody, and we'll see everybody next time on the Flip Side. You guys have a great week, and we'll
Thank you, Flip.
See you guys.